This is Lewis Hatchett, former English professional cricketer. He became pro by defying all odds with a rare condition that he was born with called Poland syndrome. No stranger to hard work and the grind, Lewis has now built his own successful podcast, app, and now helps athletes build their own mental strength to improve performance on and off the court or the field. Through his experience of becoming pro against all odds, he's able to help athletes with the mindset piece, the piece that seems to be the missing puzzle for so many. And we tackle that in this conversation. We build on our first conversation and we took it a lot further and deeper. So if you're interested in unlocking your own psychology and understanding some keys and some practical tools to get better with mindset, then this conversation is for you. Enjoy. Welcome. We are doing our first online going pro conversation, and who better than Lewis Hatchett, who we had a great conversation with. And mate, we got some really good feedback. A lot of people from the club and parents and people that I know listened to that conversation that we had, and they took a lot away from it. And we said that we wanted to do another one, and you've helped me set up this online space. So, mate, I'm absolutely pumped to kind of build on what we spoke about, and thanks for helping me out to get the ball rolling online.
Welcome to the virtual world of podcasting, mate.
Feels good to be here, man. A little bit late to the party, but yeah, we're here, mate. But there's so many things that we, I think, needed to build on from last conversation that I'm keen to build on today. So I think from our last conversation, we touched on athletes tying their identity too tightly to their sport, and I guess not really having a clear identity outside of who they are off the field or on the court. And I'm keen to kind of dive into a little bit of a discussion on what is your experience with that and how did you deal with that as a professional athlete, and then I guess what do you see with the athletes that you work with now?
I think around identity for me, it's almost, I don't think you can run away from it in terms of that you are going to tie yourself up. So I think anyone that does tie themselves up with their sport and their identity, there's nothing kind of wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying I am a tennis player, I am, for my intents and purposes, I am a professional cricketer, I am a cricketer. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But there is an element where you do have to recognise you have other identities as well. And you can feed off those as well. You can have other elements of your life that you have these separate identities that you can dip into. That can be a brother, it can be a friend, it can be a partner, it can be a son, a daughter, it can be whatever it is. You can have those different compartments of your life. And then there's an exercise I actually really like giving people that I work with. It's called human being, human doing. And essentially, really simply, you have the human doing, which is you write down all of your tasks and roles and responsibilities that you do in life. And that would be you are a tennis player, right? You might be a business owner. You might be a student. But you also might be a surfer, a painter, a dancer, a friend, a son, and all of those roles and responsibilities that you have in your life. And you put them down on one side of a sheet of paper. And then on the other side, you have human being. So you have human being on the left, human doing on the right. And then on the human being side, you write down all of the characteristics that you would like people to describe you as, or that you know to be true. So you know these characteristics are true. These are values that potentially you have. So they could be hardworking, they could be courageous, it could be adventurous, it could be enthusiastic, it could be hardworking, right? Driven. All of those characteristics you write down. And if you really struggle with those, then maybe ask someone to say, how would you describe me? In a good way, right? So you want to use all the positive things. Sure. You don't want to shoot for the negative. And then the end part of this task is to connect dots between the word that best describes the way you show up in that role and responsibility in your life. So you might find that you're an empathetic friend or a thoughtful friend. You might be an adventurous hiker. But when it comes to your sport, how do you show up? Are you a courageous tennis player? Are you a methodical tennis player? Are you a curious tennis player? All of these different ways in which you can describe how you show up in those identities. But what the brilliant part of this exercise is the fact that it shows you have multiple identities, multiple things that you come into your life with, and ways in which you can show up. And I actually found that you show up better when you do that, because it's kind of like, oh, I am a friend, but what sort of friend am I? So it first off gives you the space to be able to say, okay, I am multiple things in my life. I am a range of these different things, and I'm then going to show up in that way. That then means that when one of them is sort of falling away, the others don't have to fall away either. You can lean on those things. You can go to your guitar, you can go to your skateboard, you can go to golf, you can go to another activity, you can go to your friendships, you can go to your family, and you can lean on those identities. But for me, there is nothing wrong with saying, like, I am this athlete. That is a part of me. I think many people make the mistake of, though, is when they say, I am only this, and my worth is only attached to that. So I am only valuable if I'm a successful athlete, if I'm a successful tennis player. Your worth territory. Your identity. It's basically linking your identity with the value you feel you're bringing to the world. So are you bringing value through your results? And we know that not to be the case. Like, results wise, it's not a valuable. It's not a concrete bound thing to be able to judge your identity on. Interestingly enough, and this is random, I was just skipping through YouTube on the algorithm yesterday, but I was caught up in, we've obviously had the Alcaraz Sinner final, and then I got caught up in other finals, and one that I went to was Andy Murray and Djokovic when Andy Murray first won Wimbledon.
Yes.
And then I went and looked at Andy Murray, and he's regarded in the big four, right? And he has only won, is it 2 or 3 Grand Slams? I think it's 3 Grand Slams, but 9 finals he was in.
Yeah.
And you think of him then leaned up against your Djokovic, your Nadals, and your Federers, and he's still spoken about. But I think we speak about someone like him less about his achievements and more about how he played the game.
Yeah, that's so true.
And so for me, you look at his identity, his worth as a tennis player is not necessarily built on the trophies that he won, but he's still regarded as one of the guys that was up there with the others because of the way he went about it, the identity of who Andy Murray is. We know him to be a fighter, passionate, wears his heart on his sleeve. This actually very funny character off of the court, right? And that for me is a true identity as an athlete. It's this full combination of what you are as a player, both on and off the court. And you're not attaching yourself to what happens on the court and the success that comes there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that also gives you a lot of freedom too. Like, one thing a mentor of mine told me, similar to concept to what you're talking about here, is he explained it as U plus 0.1. So I used to beat myself up for being a chameleon back in the day, and I felt like I was always different around different people and would kind of really mold my personality based on who I was with, and I kind of went on this journey to try to figure out who I was, and I felt like I'm not really kind of me, and I'm always, I guess, like just changing and being the person I need to be in certain situations. And when I got to explain this concept, it kind of relieved me of that guilt that I felt around changing my personality, because basically it explains that at your core, you are, I guess, you have a certain version of yourself that you feel when you're maybe at peace or when you really feel just comfortable with yourself. But then outside of that, there's completely different shades of that. So who I am when I speak to my mum might be different to who I am to how I speak to a student, or who I speak to, how I'm speaking to you. And if you know that how you want to enter a situation with someone, you can kind of put on that 0.1, that shade of yourself consciously in that moment, rather than kind of just slipping into maybe a mode of yourself without really knowing why you did that, or without any intention. So it kind of made me realize I can actually be a shade of myself consciously, because this situation or this person demands that version of me, and I can bring that to this situation. So I found it very freeing. And then after that, I felt like I was consciously entering different environments with the shade of myself that I felt like was necessary in that environment. And I think you can bring that to, I guess, the sporting arena, right? Like, on this day, in these conditions, I need to bring this version of myself, or on this day against this opponent, I need to bring this version of myself. So, but if you do it with conscious intention, then you know what you're kind of getting into, whereas sometimes you don't do that and you kind of slip into a different mode, and I feel like it can really rattle you if you're not really doing it with any consciousness. This episode is brought to you by Rackets and Strings, which is Adelaide's leading racket specialist. There are 2 locations, one in Mile End and one in Sutherland Park. But don't fear, if you're not in Adelaide, you can go online and get everything you need. All tennis accessories, all racket sport accessories as well. If you are in store, you can try before you buy. They have 2 hitting walls in both their locations. You can take a demo away, and you're getting expert advice from the best in the business. They are a family business that have been doing it for 40 years, and Matt has been doing it for 20 himself. So he is extremely knowledgeable and is very good at steering you in the right direction to actually get the right equipment that is going to be good for your personal needs. And that's what makes them better than the rest, in our opinion. So please head to Rackets and Strings online, or if you're in Adelaide, get in store and get the best deals in town.
Yeah, I think about there has to be a real difference between who you are as a person and a persona, the persona that goes on the court. And there's nothing wrong with that, like you said, turning up with different tools and strategies to play in a certain way comparative to how the opponents that you are facing. So there might be a certain way you need to play and be in front of some opponents and then some against others. And yeah, there is an element to that in life as well, right? But I do also think that we have to have a core understanding of who we are and who we want to be, and be unashamedly authentic in bringing that version of yourself forward. There's a great film that I'm constantly quoting and talking about in my own podcast, which is called Jim and Andy. It's a film about Jim Carrey when he played Andy Kaufman on Man on the Moon.
I heard about this. He got so deep into that role. It's
an incredible film.
Yeah.
How he played Andy Kaufman for the entirety of the filming. And it's not a spoiler, but the film, the behind the scenes footage was hidden by Universal for 20 years because Jim Carrey was the biggest name on the planet when it came to Hollywood at the time in the 90s. And they hid the footage because they didn't want people to think that Jim Carrey was an arsehole. And it was really interesting in terms of how it's positioned as what is your true identity, who are you? But there's a line in it that Jim Carrey says, being Jim Carrey in being interviewed for the film, and he talks about saying you can take a chance on being loved or hated for who you really are, or go to your grave holding on to a character that you never were. And I think so many people do that. I think so many people are creating a character, even more so in the world we live in right now, that you have this idea of who you have to uphold, whether it's online, whether it's in person, of this character that you feel you need to uphold, but it's actually away from who you really are. And that, for me, when it comes to athletes and performance, I think when people are looking for this confidence in performance, they're actually really seeking confidence in themselves first. That I want to take that risk on that shot. I want to go for this rather than hold back because I'm worried about what people will think of me as a person. Yeah. Whereas if you can be really comfortable in who you are authentically, who you are as a human being, then win, lose or draw, whether you make that shot or you don't, you'll be comfortable with the outcome because you're comfortable with yourself. The performance is really negligible to that. It's just something that you do rather than what you are. Yeah. And I think if we step back and say, right, okay, I'm going to go into this sport, but like, do I have a real strong understanding that I'm cool with being who I am? And yeah. I actually...
Sorry to butt in, I think that's where the values that you spoke about is so important.
Yeah.
Like actually going through and like, I'm known for this, or I feel like I relate to this, and going through a checklist of actually finding that out, like what sort of player and person are you?
Yeah, and a player in tennis that I think strangely does this well is Kyrgios. I think Kyrgios, just for better or worse, is who he is. He's unapologetically that. but it gives him this kind of freedom to play on the court the way he has, because he has got the skill. We know he's got the skill to get to Grand Slam finals, but he can let it go. Right? And I think that's because of the risk that the fear of what many people get held back by. He's willing to say, I'm okay with that because I can take what negative aspects come my way because I'm just comfortable with who I am. I'm cool with that. Now, you could argue there's some sort of some quips to that, right? And do you want to be that type of person, and do you want to play that way? But ultimately, the essence is the same thing. There's this version of him that he's kind of unapologetically willing to put forward, but many people are just kind of scared of doing that. And I don't think it comes from an athlete performance element. It's actually, are they just comfortable being themselves? Are they comfortable with them being ridiculed, and whatever performance doesn't go their way, that yes, it might get critiqued, but it has no effect really on who I am, because I know who I am. I'm strong with who I am, and I am willing to be disliked in that. It comes back to a book that's one of my favorites, The Courage to Be Disliked. Like you have, and even just in the essence of the title, do you just have the courage to be disliked? Because you're going to be disliked. Yeah. There's going to be negativity towards the character you are. At some stage, someone will not like you. And the sooner you can accept that, then the easier things become.
100%. Also, I think Bublik is another clear example of this as well. I'm not sure if you listen to his press conferences.
I think he's awesome for sport right now.
Yeah, he's a less intense, in-your-face version of Kyrgios in terms of how he goes about it. But he has the same skill set essentially as Kyrgios and how he plays the game. Can almost do anything with the racket. But he is so comfortable with who he is and his choices, and how he is a family man, and how he wants to spend time with his kids, and how he wants to spend time with his wife, and how he wants to enjoy a drink and enjoy life outside of the court, and is still trying to get the most out of him, but is not going to completely sacrifice his health and like play on a dodgy knee to destroy his future of walking at the age of 50, so he can't spend time with his kids. You know what I mean? Like, he has made that abundantly clear, and I think, like exactly what you said, it just looks like he's so free on the court. Like, there is no pressure for him to, and he can actually execute things, and whether he makes it or not is like, it is what it is. But there just looks like there is so much more freedom, whereas I watch other guys, it just looks like they're so tight in comparison, because maybe they're not actually clear on those things, like, or not unapologetically themselves, like Kyrgios and Bublik, for example.
Well, yeah, one of the biggest issues I see with any athlete, whether it's tennis or any sport, is the fact that there is a lack of self-confidence in themselves. So I actually, weirdly, I actually, as a young person myself, and to understand my story, we went through that in the previous episode, so I'm not going to cover it here. But as a young person, when I was growing up, I was really not confident. I was very anxious. My disposition is anxious, to be sort of people-pleasing, to kind of care what people think about me. And I actually have seen that through the medium of podcasting over the last 4 or 5 years, that regardless of how the show has gone, if I could take away all the episodes I've done or take them all together and think, what is the thing that I've actually gained out of this podcast? Without a doubt, it is the ability to convey message and come across and improve my ability to be confident, knowing that I can just be myself. I can just be that person. I don't have to put on a mask. I look at the very first few episodes and I cringe at looking at them, thinking kind of this person that was very conscious of the camera that I was on, and I was not really engaged in the conversations because I'm so conscious of all of that. And I actually think, as a tool for especially young players to really build their self-confidence, is if you can get comfortable at public speaking, if you can get really comfortable at speaking to other people, you'll build a level of self-confidence, because you're kind of putting yourself out there. Now, you can do that through the medium of building a burner account on TikTok and posting videos on there, right? And just do that and just get brave at doing that. But you could also just have conversations with adults, coaches. And funny enough, and you might have found this, is that if you can do it through the medium of coaching, teaching other people, leading through the way, conveying the message, you kind of uphold some accountability for yourself, that you are kind of needing to practice what you preach, but also just that ability to be in front of people, put yourself out there, risk being kind of ridiculed by the athletes in front of you. Not to say that they will, but the idea of like, what are they thinking? I wonder what they consider me to be. And if you can do that, that's just not even a development for your game in terms of technicality. It's just a human being development that you could find will give you that level of self-confidence to grow within yourself, to then maybe translate it to your sport. And I would really be comfortable to say that, yeah, that would be something I could see majority of the time improving. But there's, for me, a good correlation between young kids that can openly talk and engage and converse and put themselves out there and their confidence on the pitch. It's not a direct correlation, but I would say anecdotally, I could say players that I've seen that can talk well, that are comfortable doing that, they're willing to take those risks out there because it's kind of more about who they are as a person. And you don't have to be extroverted to do that, by the way. You don't have to be this loud, brash person. If you're introverted, you can still talk, like you can still engage, you can still convey a message. You haven't got to do it in this outlandish way that's super extroverted. But I do think just as a personal skill, it's a simple way to start to build some level of self-confidence.
100%. I think you're spot on. It was a game changer for me when I actually started to go through public speaking course. I was shit scared of putting myself out there in front of people. And I think all it's done is just allowed me to put myself out there in front of people and back myself in and feel comfortable speaking in front of people. And it's just led me into a whole range of different opportunities and meeting amazing people and networking. And I'll also say, even though I haven't been trying to push my tennis to go to the highest level in the last years, I still compete at a reasonable level and try to train. Who I am now on court is so different to who I was when I was even in my early 20s. Just how composed I am and how I back myself in moments is so much better than what it was. And like you, I default to more of an anxious background and anxious kind of temperament. So and then I'll rush and then I'll get overwhelmed. And the amount that happens now, or how I can catch myself and actually stay composed and just slow down, is just improved dramatically. And I think that's a lot from public speaking, to be honest. And I think we're seeing kids grow up in a world now where they are struggling with this a lot. Social media has really skewed their belief about themselves and the world and other people, and they're so connected to what people think all the time, and they're seeing it all the time, that I really do think they are hyper paralyzed from making decisions and acting in a way that they actually want to, because they're so fearful around these things that we're talking about. And I think it is a superpower now that if you can just be confident, you can talk well, you can actually read the room and feel confident to go up to someone and talk to someone. Where I would say that would have just been normal in the past and quite common for a lot of people, but now I think people struggle to even look you in the eye in the younger generation and have a conversation. So I guess you've spoken about one way here to work with that, but I guess what else would you suggest, or what else would you comment on here to actually help to build that, or help kids with this and some of the things that maybe you're noticing with the generation?
What you've talked on there, I think, is something I've been considering about my own journey, which was, how did I, as an anxious kid, as this kid who was really low in probably self-confidence and high in anxiety, you would kind of think that's not the kid that's going to make it to a professional level in their sport. You would think that's not the one that's going to go there. And I've been thinking about this, like what was allowing me to put myself in these uncomfortable positions to do those things that, whether it was other people weren't willing to do, or you kind of risked ridicule. Now, I can't deny that if you want to go and get this thing, which is better performance, or you want to improve your game, or maybe you want to turn pro, whatever it is, there is going to be an element of when you put yourself out there, you open the door for ridicule. You do. You just have to. But you also have to think about who that person is that's ridiculing you. Are they important in your life? I think of moments when I did get made fun of for some of the things that I did when I was a young pro. Those people that did it, I haven't seen them for years. I wish them all the best. I don't know where they're at. I hope that they are enjoying their lives. I care about them, but I don't care what they think about me. But that, for me, is a really healthy place for you to be able to get to if you can get there. But for me, as this young person, and I think this is the thing that would be really important for young people to hear, is that the want for whatever it is that you are chasing needs to be so strong or stronger than the fear of the ridicule, the fear of the insecurity, the fear of the failure. And it has to be this blind faith and belief that I'm willing to do all of these things or have all of these things come my way because I want this other thing so much more. Now, again, that has to be wrapped up in doing it in a healthy way, that you're not attaching to outcome result. And I, through therapy and through talking on the podcast and talking to people and having conversations with my own guests, I've realized I did something that I now aim for with my clients, that we don't necessarily always focus on their performance. We don't focus on unlocking the mental skills that are going to allow them to do that next point or set or match, whatever it might be, or tournament. We actually just focus on their character first. Who are you in winning and defeat? Who are you? Like, what? How do you go about things? If you are to undoubtedly have a setback, what are you going to do? Recently was talking to the coach of a young player who did really well in the Junior French Open, and we were having coffee and talking about, and actually talking through the tournament about sort of upcoming matches. And one of the issues they had faced in the past was around when things didn't go their way early and they were down a set early and needed to fight back two, that they would maybe just kind of spiral and that would be it, that kind of be a write-off. And maybe even vice versa. Maybe even they actually won the first set, then lost the second, and then they just sort of tanked from then on. And actually it wasn't the fact that the other person won it, it was actually the fact that they kind of just let it go. And I spoke to him about it, and I said, have you ever gone into a tournament or gone into a match where you've preempted the failure that could come? So have you said, how are we going to face losing the first set? Show me, tell me, describe to me what I want to see, or what you want to see, or what you would like to hear. If you were watching yourself, what would you see or hope to see if that person has gone a set down and is writing this hero story of how they come back and win it? What do we need to see? And describe it. And then when they preload it, it's great. You just play it when it happens, but you're no longer afraid of this thing happening. You're no longer afraid of the failure coming, on the ridicule that could be there and the negative self-talk. And we kind of have to not only figure this out in the micro level, but in a macro level for life, that what is the negative situation that could happen in my life? And I weirdly think about this sort of existential thing is what happens when one of my parents passes? How do I want to be when that happens? It's one of the most tragic things that will happen in your life, but it undoubtedly will come, right? And it's something we have to face. So how do you want to be in the face of that happening? And I do actually play that in my mind. I play like, how do I want to be in that character? But that is a very dark and existential one in your life. But you do it in a micro level within sport. What do I do when this death happens in the game, which is me losing the first set? And I would really be interested to know from a Carlos Alcaraz point of view, when he was 3 championship points down to Yannick Sinner, what was he thinking? Had he preloaded something like that occurring? Had they even trained for something like that? And then him just play that scenario, whether it's not necessarily the point and the way which he's playing the game, because he's a great player and he can adapt on the court, but more about how he composed himself. Just a preemptive, like if you're down, really up against it, everything's going to look like it's going to go against you. How do you show up? Do you stay cool, calm, collected? Do you let it go? Do you just try harder? Do you become tense? What do we want to see? Let's go practice it. And you can genuinely practice those things.
100%. I wish more people did that. I mean, that is just gold there, what you're talking about, to actually face scenarios in your mind so that when they arise, you feel hopefully more mentally ready to prepare or handle them, right? So, did you do that? Were you doing that when you were a pro as a cricketer, or was that something that you did after?
No, I did. I remember, I'm a big believer in negative visualization. So people visualize and they kind of go through their whole secret mentality and I want to manifest what comes my way, and I can see myself lifting trophy. Now, sure, we want to know what the positive thing is and we want to go to that. But I think when you only focus on the positive thing, undoubtedly when something scary happens and negative occurs, it can shock you if that hasn't happened because you don't feel prepared. And real anxiety is trying to control something you can't control but want to control it. So if we want to battle anxiety back, then let's bring some form of control. Now, the control is that we can plan for when that thing happens. We can plan for when you have anxiety. And I, for example, plan in my mind, or I planned when I play, I plan what happens if I get hit for six, if I'm facing a player much better than me and they get on top of me. What am I going to do? How am I going to respond? It actually took me a very negative scenario to happen. It was my T20 debut live on Sky Sports, and that happened to me where it was a train crash of a game and I got smacked for 26 in an over, and I remember coming off and going, I really wasn't prepared for that. I really wasn't prepared for it. But what I kind of got out of it was I got the experience. I got the experience of something so bad happening that I was able to just be okay with it happening again or getting into a similar situation, then learning how to deal with it. But then I started to think about, okay, well, what happens if other negative scenarios happen? What happens if I'm playing a game and my ankle gets really tight and it's sore? And how would I play then? And how would I deal with it? Like, am I going to fight through it, or am I just going to hold my hand up and try and come off the pitch? Like, I would decide those sorts of things. And even now I transfer it into if I'm doing a keynote speech now. A keynote speaking is probably more terrifying than actually going and playing professional sport, I think, because it's just solely you. Your words are the thing that matters, and people will judge you on that. And I get panic attacks sometimes before I go on to speak, and I have preempted that. So I know I'm going to be nervous. I know I'm going to potentially have this. Yeah. So then from that, I have this kind of strategy that I use for myself of a breathing technique and 2 mantras that essentially allow me to go out there and combat that anxious feeling and negative scenario that I've thought of. Yeah. And it's the same with sport. Bring it back to tennis. It's, have you considered playing a French Open qualifying match and being really nervous? And have you played with, if your response is your body becomes really tired and sluggish and your legs go to jelly, okay, let's go and train something similar. We may not be able to create the anxiety and the nerves. We might be able to. Maybe we can get the local tennis club, we can get a bunch of players to watch you play and judge you and have eyes on you. Almost, it's not the same, but it's similar. Or maybe we run you ragged for half an hour, fatigue you, so your legs are like jelly, and then you play a set and you practice the feeling and being in the chaos. The way I described it to this coach was, can you ultimately be calm within the chaos? Can you be calm within a tornado? If you think of everything as like a tornado around you and it's chaotic and it's pressure, can you be the one calm in the center? But the only way to know what that feels like is to try and simulate a tornado, try to get close to feeling it. And then, okay, if I know this is going to happen, how would I respond? And you've preempted that.
Yeah, it's so good. I wish, like I said, I wish more people did this. How would it look for you in a training session to do this, I guess, or how would you embed it as a coach into the sessions around some of this negative visualization, or negative, I guess, preempting scenarios? Because I think this is such a key here, what you're talking about, to actually unlock more clarity and composure when it matters.
So that if you want to create pressure in a scenario, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about creating pressure. You have to know that it's very hard to simulate the actual pressure. For example, a football World Cup penalty shootout final when Argentina won against France. Like, there's no one that can simulate that amount of pressure. Like, that is one of the ultimates. But you can get close and you can get near. And there's a few things that you want to try and add into your training that will allow you to build that pressure. One is fatigue. So usually a lot of coaches will do that. They'll try and fatigue their players, and that will create a lot of chaos in the mind of a player. And I do think that's important, because if you think about it, when you are fatigued, you will become a little bit lazy. You will start to do things and that aren't what you would do if you were fresh. And that's right. Like, yes, you're fatigued. But I think also that's what made this Sinner Alcaraz final so impressive. It was 5.5 hours, and just the clarity in both of those players towards the end. Now, they have the benefit of being a little bit older. They have the benefit of being at that level and all of the resources to help them out. But the premise is still the same. If you can play with that fatigue, if you can train and have been there and have felt it, and that's not only chaos in the body, your body will be screaming at you, but that's a signal and it's a message to your mind. Can you then try and bring yourself back to the present moment, to what is important in this moment, of whether it's technical cues or game plan that you have to execute, or even if it's just verbal cues that you're telling yourself, something that brings you back to how you would be playing if you are fresh, logical, and okay. So fatigue is one. Another one is an element of judgment. So that is just coaches, that's people that are potentially important and that might have that level of judgment on you. And yeah, we talk about judgment in this negative sense, but judgment is linked with sport. You are going to be judged. You are going to have that. So if you can add an element of judgment into training, then maybe I don't like playing with that one, because I think some coaches, when they hear that, they can get let loose on that one, and then they can think it's okay to sort of berate their players and really create an element of judgment. So I don't like playing with that one, but I think if you haven't added it in, or you haven't done it before, and maybe you're a little bit too nice with your player, then maybe you can add that one in. Another one is peers. So an element of judgment from peers, and peers seeing what you're doing. We used to do this as a professional cricketer, where we would create leaderboards. You would create leaderboards for tasks and skills, and essentially you are being judged by your peers, but you're also competing against your peers, and that pressure to want to be better, want to be seen. You might see that more in squads training, like that sort of element of peers, and that starts to build the pressure, and you can easily ramp that up as a coach, right? You can easily start to add elements of competition in for players and use the peer pressure. One session that I really wanted to do when I was a pro, and I would love to run this with not only cricketers but tennis players and anyone, is that there's always especially at the pro level, there was a real opportunity to get clubs and kids to come and watch training sessions, to be able to turn up to a pro training session. And I got this idea from, he's actually the England selector for the England cricket team at the moment. His name's Luke Wright. And he was a teammate of mine. And I remember him telling me about a school that he had been to where they did this really cool event. Luke was amazing at hitting sixes. And he had this incredible technique to ability to hit a six straight. And he was one of the biggest hitters he played in the Big Bash in Australia, and he played for England. And he told us about this session that he'd done at a school, and it was a private school, and they'd built a net. They had their net out in the middle. They put a mic on Luke and a speaker next to the kids and a bowling machine, and it was just practicing hitting sixes. They got him to pad up, bring his kit, and practice hitting sixes. And whilst he was doing it, he was teaching the kids what he was doing. He was actually telling the kids what he was doing. But he described it, this session, that he felt so much pressure to get it right because he didn't want to mess up for these kids. And these kids are sort of between the ages of 12 and 18. And ultimately, like, they're opinions that aren't really going to influence his career. But he felt the eyes on them, and they were so close, and they could see all the intricate details. It was almost like this idea of them being in his mind for a bit, right? They're getting an insight into his mind. But I thought, how cool would it be if you could create a training session where you grab a bunch of people who potentially know the player and you line them up on the court and you get that player to perform their training session, and you get them to essentially say what they're going to do. They tell them where they're going to try and serve the ball, and they have to uphold that. They have this level of accountability, but this added pressure to do that. And I promise you the heart rates will show up, right? They will increase in that player, because there's this element of accountability that comes along with it, the nerves and the pressure. And as long as you preload that player with how to deal with that pressure and what they're trying to focus on, and they know what to be doing in that moment, then the outcome at the other end of it, hoping it's gone well, that it's been successful in terms of its outcome of training, or whether it has or hasn't gone well, you can review it and give them confidence going, hey, it didn't go well, we've got a bunch of things that we can work on, that's fine, this was something to really stretch you. But also, if it did go well and you had success, dude, you handled that so well. Wow, that was awesome how you came out of that. So I really like this idea of using peer pressure to build pressure within training. Now, the only caveat to that is it does require a bit of resource, requires you having those people around. But I don't think it's impossible. We were really fortunate to be able to do that sort of thing in a cricket sense, because we were a group of bowlers and we got all the bowlers to line up along the nets, and the bowlers are sledging you, they're abusing you, and you've got to try and focus in on it. But geez, it gave me the ability to know that I could shut out when that noise was around me and just have chaos happening, that storm happening, and be calm within it. And I'll stop talking in a minute. And the last one is consequence. This is a big one, which is that you put something on it, right? It could be a bet. It could be someone buys someone dinner. It could be someone buys the Mars bars and the Kit Kats at the end of the training session. Well, maybe something a bit more healthy, or like the can of Coke or whatever, right? But you put a consequence on it. We did something similar. We put our pressure training to the test, and we're in the UK, in the south of the UK, and our training facilities right by the beach. And so the players who failed the sort of test that we put out there, the pressure test, they had to go into the sea neck height in the middle of November here in the UK. And it was, I think the sea is sort of about 4 degrees. And yeah, that really ramped up the pressure. You did not want to have to go in your swimsuit and get it neck deep into the British water. So there's something that you can do, right? Something to create that challenge. And I'm a really big proponent of that when I'm working with athletes. I think if you can add that level of training in, and there's so much around it that you have to build for the athlete as well. But also, even if you just do it, you can start to learn how to review those sessions. You can start to then look at where the weak spots are, the elements of the strengths of what they're doing, how they show up, what happens to them when they're under pressure. But I think a lot of athletes run away from that training because it shows them up a lot. It shows them up in a way that they don't want to be seen, it's hard, it's challenging, and I'm worried I'm not going to do well in it. So yeah, those are some things to add pressure, to really challenge them, and some ways I enjoy.
Yeah, I love it. There's in our squads, we see those exact scenarios that you're talking about. We need to do it more and replicate it more. But just to your point there that you made at the end, it means that I've noticed a pattern with certain players that don't come back to our squads because we are geared in that direction, and they end up having to face more accountability. They slide down the courts because we have a moving up, moving down scenario when you play.
This is squads you're talking about,
yeah? Squads. So I noticed that when they're in those moments, they end up sliding down the courts, and then they don't want to have to face that, and they just like the rhythm of hitting with someone, or paying like a paid hitter, or having only private lessons where you don't ever have to face that, and then you avoid that. But obviously you're not really getting better at facing those moments, and when it comes down to crunch time, the chances of you doing it when it matters is obviously going to be lower if you're not even willing to do it in training, for example.
Well, actually, just on that real quick, like I think that's when a lot of athletes misguide what the slogan of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think too many athletes misinterpret that phrase of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable as physical effort. They think I got to be uncomfortable with going to the gym, doing the hard yards on the road, doing that. Something as uncomfortable as being shown up in front of peers, being willing to try and execute your skill in front of a group of people that are teammates, colleagues, competitors, opposition, that's uncomfortable. And if you can get comfortable with that, that is a huge growth opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just gets me thinking, like I just don't want to be a lazy coach where I'm not really trying to innovate the way that we do our trainings, that we are not putting these moments in. Like, I just want to keep trying to find ways that we can kind of sprinkle them in and get that feeling, you know, where you actually feel the tenseness, or you feel the uncomfortability, or the pressure cooker that you need to face in these moments. And I just think part of why coaches don't do it is because it's hard. Like, it's actually hard to kind of create that environment all the time and hold people accountable. And it's so much easier just to be lazy and go through just stock standard drills that kind of everyone does, essentially.
Yeah, it's a bit of bravery and courage in being unique and creative in your training sessions. 100%. I did a really good podcast episode with Dr. Veronique Richard on my show. She's a mental performance coach for Cirque du Soleil, and we talked about the creativity of training, of sport. She did a lot of research in creativity in sports. Well, she's doing research in it because it's actually not well researched. But there is an element, you have to be brave as a coach and you have to be brave to do that. And it's actually something I'm curious about developing at the moment, is a course or community to help coaches in trying to build these sorts of sessions out. And I see it as a huge opportunity. But even in that scenario that we've just spoken about there, where you've got squads and that player is sliding down and they're not performing, or the pressure is getting to them and they're unable to do it. If you were to set up every training session like that, it would be a relentless environment. And we can probably talk about building resilience in environments in a bit, but you create a very relentless environment if you're constantly adding this pressure in. You use the word sprinkle, which is exactly what you want to do. You want to sprinkle these sessions around. I think of them like a long distance runner and how they train. They train 80% of their runs are easy runs, where they're just doing what's called a Kenyan shuffle, where they're barely just... They're just very low zone 2 heart rate, and it's real easy. But then one session a week is this threshold and interval session that stretches them and pushes them. And that's when they do that, and it takes a little bit of time to recover, but they use their other sessions to allow them to recover. Now, the other sessions are not designed to be going through the motions. They're actually building something. But I think we can do that as athletes. I think we can do that in our technical skills, our mental skills, and start to add that pressure, sprinkle it in. I tend to sort of prescribe one every 5 to 7 days. I think if you can do that, like it's a really good, or one every 5 to 7 sessions, it's a really good sort of rotation and cadence to get into when you're thinking about building pressure moments like that. But for coaches, I think there's an element of being able to not only build the session, but be able to communicate and review with the athlete when it goes both well and badly. Yes. And when they are sliding down that squad and you're seeing them succumb to the pressure, it's very easy as a coach to just go, they haven't got it. They piss and moan, they throw their toys out the pram, and you judge them as this adolescent or maybe pre-adolescent individual that doesn't have a fully formed brain. And that is an opportunity where you go in there and you build that character. You go, okay, you've had a tough session. How do you want to respond to this? Like I've seen glimpses of you doing that. Where's that person gone? Bring that person out. Who's the role model in tennis you like? You like Nadal? Great. Let's be this workhorse. Let's be the fighter. Let's go out there. Now go out there for the next half hour and just imagine you're a Nadal. Just go out there and go at it. And if you can do that, you could flip someone around. You might see them just suddenly come up. It might not be a tennis thing at all, because we kind of know majority of these things that happen aren't necessarily down to someone's technical skill, because the way you described it was an individual might be amazing having hitters and doing it in the solo sessions, but then get them around a group, and that's just sort of their chink in the armor. But it's not the chink in the armor that should bring the card that just collapses the whole tower of cards, right? it's just one part that you need to develop. It's a siloed area that can just have some attention, and that's where the coach, after the session or during the session, can be really smart with communicating in a compassionate, empathetic way, but also some form of accountability and I think inspiration. Coaches need to be motivators. You should be there to motivate them as well. So think of those coaches that get all of the films done after them, and they're these motivating characters. Yes, they might be Americanized, but there is an element of that kids just need encouraging words. They need to know, like, I've got this, I can do this, I'm the man, I'm the girl, I'm the woman, I'm the whatever. Like, let's go for it. And there's an element of that where in these sessions that can really play a big role.
100%. It's our responsibility to mould and make sure that we're, like, we have to guide. We can't just give up and not invest, right? There's so many teaching moments in sessions, and that we have to take responsibility, and we can't just go, oh, too hard, not going to put in the effort to actually, help athletes understand whether they can improve in a certain area, but also tell them why they've done something so well, and the learning moment in that too, that, like, well, when you do this and this, it came together like this, and that's amazing. And if you can replicate that more often, I can see you really moving in an upward direction that is going to be amazing for you in the next 6 months if you just keep moving in this direction. So it's really important to actually highlight these moments and be an educator, essentially.
Yeah, and the athletes come out of it mentally tougher. And I don't say that as if they're going to run through walls or be this Arnold Schwarzenegger type character that's like the Terminator. It's the fact that they've had a challenge, they've had something that is there that has created some resistance, and they've managed to work through it. They've managed to come back with some form of a self-created or a coach-assisted tool that allows them to build a better understanding of how they play the game. But you might also, it comes all the way back to the idea of identity. They might have lent on some part of their identity in themselves that they're really proud of. I'm a really big believer in when you're faced with a athlete or kid, whether it's in sport or not, right, that's going through a challenging moment, and damn it, anyone can take this. My number one thing I will say to them is, if you were to look back on this moment in a year's time and be proud of yourself, what is it that you have to have done? And how do you need to go about it? And I promise you the answer comes really quickly. So that kid who's tanking in a session that's really struggling, how do you need to go about this in order to be really proud of yourself when we look back on today in a year's time? And they'll come up with these, I need to take a breath. I need to get back into the session. I need to focus on what I'm good at. I don't need to give up. Like, if I give up, I'm not going to be proud of myself. All of those things, right? They will find the answers very, very quickly. And you can assist them with that as a coach. And after that level of pride that you feel, wow, unmatched, right? Yeah. It's unmatched of how you feel about yourself. And then you're just layering more and more experiences of the person you say you are and you want to be, that you're actually becoming.
100%. Yeah, absolutely spot on. One more thing I want to touch on quickly is you spoke about vulnerability and your mental health journey. So what role did vulnerability play in helping you actually get stronger, not just mentally, but emotionally, rationally? Was there anything there that you think helped you as an athlete at all there?
I actually think this came for me more as a later thing in life, and I think this has been something I've now in my 30s developed more. And it's like a lot of people, you kind of wish you had the head on your shoulders now that you have when you were 20 years old, but that's life, isn't it? It's just how things go. I have found that when I played, I'm really big on trying to build mental resilience in people, and I think that's a big thing we want to try and build in people. And that can get misconstrued, especially I find America is very good at doing this, is that you create this sort of win-at-all-cost mentality, like, I am the man. I'm going to wake up at 4:30 every morning and I'm going to hustle and grind, and that's me, the strength that I need to have. And there's this idea of being strong, and I'm a really big person, especially for men, trying to figure out what masculinity is right now and being a strong man. And I did that. I was that person. I was the hustle grinder. I was the one throwing myself through brick walls at every opportunity and burning out and going hard. And look, an element of that is got me to where I needed to be. Now, I don't want to take away from that. You do have to work hard to get where you want to be. But I think it did come at a cost for relationship building for me. So the ability to build relationships. And also there was probably a moment when I turned pro where I'd realised I'd been so stubborn in the way I'd done things because I had done a lot of things on my own. I didn't really use many coaches to get there. I was sort of there was an element of a lot of what I did that was self-discovered and self-taught and sort of self-work. I didn't work with a coach and need them. And it was a big element of my strength because I was self-sufficient. But when I got to being a pro, I was fairly closed off. And a coach would give me something, and I would say, that's not how I do it. This is how I do it. And I hadn't registered that I'd gone up a level and that I needed to do things differently. And that just because I'd done things the way I'd already done them and they got me to turning pro and gave me the contract and got me on the scene, that was the way I was going to do things moving forward. That was the way I was going to...
So you didn't... do you think that held you back from actually going further in your pro career? Was that one of the main limiting factors?
Well, I eventually then conceded. I eventually then became, and that's for me where the vulnerability bit kicks in, was that I was able to go, I may not have all the answers here. I may not have that. And that vulnerability was not this, I think that it's so hard to know when you're talking about vulnerability, how people are going to interpret that word and what they see it as. But it was not this willingness to talk about my emotions. For me, it was just willingness to acknowledge that I wasn't getting everything right the way I was doing it, right? And that I could be open. Essentially. Yeah, I could be open to doing something different. And that it is literally dropping the ego. It's exactly how you've described it. And that, I don't think it was a coincidence that when that happened was when I started practicing mindfulness. So, which is the dissolving and the detachment from your ego. And when I'd done that, that was a big gateway that opened for me to improve my performance. And then I started performing better and I was getting more opportunities. And that for me is always the one sort of what if moment. A big what if moment in my life was kind of, what if I hadn't got injured at 26, and how good a cricketer I would have been going from 26 to 32, because that was when I remember when after I retired and got fit again after the injury that ended my career, I started playing cricket again at 28, and it just clicked. Everything just clicked. I had this full control of my skill, the way I trained, and all of that was through opening of going. I was able to accept that I could do things differently and detach from my ego. So, in vulnerability, in that sense, that's kind of one way it showed up for me, was this ability to let go of the way I'd done things before. I needed to be open to doing new things in order to not change. And I think people worry that you're going to have to change in order to do that. It's not. It's evolution. It's just pure evolution as a person, and you're layering, you're evolving into someone new, and you're becoming like a think of yourself as like Optimus Prime, and you're like this transformer that's just building more blocks onto you, and vulnerability just happens to be one of those armors that comes on, right? And I see that as a big gap for a lot of athletes. The fact that you are open to being told that the way you're doing things, you might need to do things differently, to be vulnerable to acknowledge that you might not know all the answers. There are kind of a group of young individuals that you might see where some are really anxious and worried that what they're going to say is going to be the wrong thing. But I also do think there's another camp where there's I don't want to say the word entitled, but similar sort of vein, where they feel like they've got a lot of the answers. They don't need to know. Like they present a version of themselves that is confident, but actually internally they're not. And the vulnerability would be to say, like, I want to be curious, I want to learn, I want to hear from you. I don't think there's anything better right now than having a young person who is passionate and enthusiastic and curious. If you ever find one of those kids, catch them, capture them. They are a unicorn right now because I think those. Let me know. I want to study it. Those people. They are the ones that will really do well, regardless of physicality, skill level. Because if they can keep those traits and they can keep working on those, then they will go far. But around those traits is a level of vulnerability. Like, to be vulnerable, to be curious, to ask questions, to say you don't know, to learn and develop. And if you can do that, there's a huge opportunity out there right now.
Absolutely. Is there anything else in terms of vulnerability that you would, give advice to the younger generation on how they could be doing that to, help elevate their performance, but also help manage their emotions and the angst that we see these days?
Well, I think for everything comes back to this idea of kind of know thyself, and that's why for me I'm a big proponent of genuinely training your mindset, understanding yourself, understanding how your brain works. It's sort of a shameless plug here, but I built the 14-day introductory course on the Mind Strong Sport app as an idea of being able to give people it's completely free. People can just download the app and they get free access to the course. And it's 14 days of mindfulness meditation to understand your mind, your moods, your emotions, your thoughts, like how you experience your mind through mindfulness meditation, because it requires you to sit down and be with your mind for a bit, right? But I'd wrap it in this idea of building mental strength, because I never want to do this. And even how I present things, whether it's vulnerability, resilience, whatever it might be, is not wrapping it around this idea of softness, because I think we don't need to be too soft right now. I think there is an element where we do need to be a bit stronger. So for me, this idea of using vulnerability as a form of building your mental strength is really important. And so I come back to, again, if we talk about resilience and how do we build this vulnerability, well, vulnerability would be willing to go into a training session that you know is kind of going to expose you a little bit, that it's going to expose some parts of your game that you're not comfortable with having exposed, that you aren't training just to not make mistakes. You're training to open up the way in which you deal with mistakes and deal with things not going well. And that requires vulnerability. But in essence, all of that is so strong. Like, imagine if you had an athlete that did that, going, Luke, let's have a training session and I want you to literally run me ragged. I want you to hit to my weak backhand, right? I want you to serve to this side of the court that's going to be really tough for me. If a player came to you with that, you would think, oh my God, this player's so all over it. This person's going to go far. But the vulnerability it requires for them to go up to you and to say, I need to do this because this is a part of my game that I want to get right and I'm going to get exposed. And actually, as I'm talking, I think of what I used to do. So one of my roles as a professional cricketer was what's called a night watchman. If you don't know cricket, it's a really sucky role. It's you're a lower order batsman and you are designated as the sacrificial lamb or shield for an evening. It's usually the last half hour of a day when the batting team are batting and they don't want to send in a top order batter in case they kind of get out and they've lost another wicket that they have to deal with the next day. They send in a lower order batter. And when you go in and do that job, you're either bombarded with balls at your head, them trying to hit you in the head, or trying to rip your toes off and get you out, right? And it's not a comfortable situation, and it can be quite daunting, especially because you don't have the technical capabilities and strengths that the top order batters have. So you kind of know you've got weaknesses. And I was handed that role straight away from day one of me playing first class cricket, but I loved it because it played to two of my biggest values, which were bravery and courage. But when I came to training, I remember going to training sessions to my coach and I said, right, I need you for an hour. Can you grab that ball? I want you to throw 3 yards closer than the normal pitch length. And I want you to just try and hit me in the head. I want you to try and hurt me. I want you to be aggressive. I want you to really go at me. And I thought of those moments as me being kind of mentally tough and strong and resilient and all of the good things that you might think of describing that. But it's kind of an element of vulnerability in that, right? Like I was willing to do that session and look a fool, and I did. Like I got hit, I got balls popping up in the air, and the coach was on top of me, and like he loved it. Like it was I had this South African coach who just was so aggressive and so competitive, and he loved it. But when the days when I suddenly started to figure it out and I got better at it, he would just be dude, you're all over this. Like he would just encourage me so much, and it gave me that confidence to go out and do it and feel like I could do it, because I'd faced that level of intimidation, I'd faced that level of training, and it does come from an element of vulnerability to get yourself out there and do a session like that, to be able to say, look, I need to put myself out of this comfort zone, and that requires vulnerability. But in it is strong. It is such a strong mind to do it. And I just think that comes from the interpretation of the word and the way we deliver it to people out there. Like this idea of vulnerable means you have to open up and lie down on the couch and talk about your deepest, darkest thoughts. It's like, no, it's just you open up yourself to some form of growth and development that requires you seeing and experiencing elements that you may be not as capable as you have been in the past, and you've got some holes in, but you're willing to try and fill those holes through practice, repetition, and effort.
100%. I love the reframe, and I think it's an important one to actually see it as strong as well, rather than just like crying and talking about your feelings, which I think has been the way that it's been viewed in recent times. And I think that's bang on the money. And I think if we can look at it in that way, I think there's a huge element of growth there for a lot of people, and it also would be more appealing to, I think, a wider audience that would be wanting to go, well, hang on a minute, like it's actually would be really good of me and really good for me to be vulnerable in this way.
Yeah, I think there is an element to it that I do get worried about in the present world that we have right now, which is that, and it's why I reframe it, is that when we lend in the opportunity for vulnerability, we potentially lend it and open up the opportunity for coddling. Yeah. And I say that we want people to share their emotions, we want people to tell us about the experiences that they have, but we don't want to pander to those emotions if it means that it, in the long term, it's going to have detrimental effects to that individual, because we're stopping them or shielding them from the experiences that we know are going to make them grow. And that then kind of leads into this, for me, how you build resilient environments, how you build elements that are really challenging for people, but there's an element of support within them that doesn't allow them to feel too relentless and daunting and intimidating. And if we can get that balance right, where you have that balance of support and challenge, and to give people an idea, there's an episode I did with Professor Mustafa Zakar, who's a leader in resilience in sport. He created the challenge support matrix of how you build resilient environments and build kind of mental toughness within those environments. And it's this balance of challenge and support that we have, and how that shows up. And it's what the challenge looks like, it's what the support looks like. And I do get a little bit worried when I see people kind of bowing to the wants of an individual's, when they've been vulnerable and they've spoken about their emotions and they've got them to identify it. And I think of it as these three ways that you want to identify your emotion, you want to process it, and then you want to manage it. Yeah. And the processing and the managing is where you start to build the strength, but you've got to identify it first. And I think what happens is we kind of cut people off at some stage where we go, we've identified that this is making you anxious. Okay, how can we protect that anxiety? Rather than actually you go, how do you process anxiety, and then how do you just manage dealing with anxiety moving forward, rather than trying to remove it and get rid of it. And we know that if we get rid of that anxiety, comes back to the kind of negative visualization. If you've only been having positive experiences in training, if you've only been doing things when you feel good and not making mistakes and being flawless and trying to be perfect and having these nice environments that feel good, when you undoubtedly go out into the real world and the real experiences, and especially in sport, and you are on that arena and there is undoubtedly a level of anxiety and discomfort, it is going to feel so challenging and it is going to feel so daunting. You're going to feel so unequipped to deal with it. And all that requires is building this ability to identify what's going on, process it, and manage the emotion. And all of that is built around building your resilience, building your mental strength, building your character that can deal with that. And you have to have practiced that. It is something that has to be practiced and really focused on, because how many times do we see really good players that have got all the skill in the world, but the thing that let them down was how they went about it and their mindset and their anxiety, their confidence, or whatever it might be. It's too often we're seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's only just going to happen more and more if we're not looking at these things that we're talking about. So some absolute gold here, mate. I think the reframing around vulnerability, and also what we spoke about at the start with the values, and really what do you want to be known for. The negative, scenario, where you're looking at the worst case scenarios and what can happen is gold. And I think there's so many amazing things here to grab onto. And mate, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing it with me first time online, mate. Love it.
Nailed it. Yeah. If people want to reach out and find out more about what we're doing, what we're building, just Instagram at Lewis Hatchett. It's the best place to go, or lewishatchett.com, and the app is mindstrongsport.com. But I'm loving. I just really love being in the tennis world right now. I think when we're recording this, we're coming up into grass season and Wimbledon, and we've just had the French Open. But yeah, I've as you know, I've moved into the tennis world, and I think I just think it's one of the hardest sports in the world. I think tennis players, like what it teaches you about yourself, what it teaches you about sport, like the ability to be able to play it. But I think of so many people, I don't know about you, but a lot of people who talk about tennis in this kind of negative way, like it's this kind of really tough game that can beat you down. But I'm like, what a great thing to have in your life, that if you can conquer it and you can learn through it, then you're just kind of invincible in life.
That's the way I see it. I'm so grateful for it. And it's, I'm glad that you see it as well, coming from a professional athlete in different sport, because I'm obviously biased, but I do think it is maybe the hardest sport in the world.
I think every element that is encapsulated within it is just there. Every element. I will be biased again, and I've done a video on why I think cricket is one of the most mentally challenging sports, and I weirdly think it's just above tennis. And I don't say that again. That's so hard, me saying that as being from a cricketer to a tennis player, and being like, my sport is tougher than yours. But I just say it because they're one of the things that I think makes a sport mentally challenging and tough is outside of physical danger, which I think boxing and MMA just supersede everything. Yep. Is an element of how many uncontrollables exist within the sport. And in cricket, there's so many. Like the pitch that you're playing on can change within half an hour. The conditions can change moment by moment. The ball changes literally as you're going through the match. And the opponents and everything constantly there's umpires' decisions that don't go your way. There's so much self-doubt. There's so much time to spend like not doing anything but having to be switched on and switched off. And in tennis, I think there are so many elements of that, but I also think there's so much in your control. And my thing to a lot of tennis players, which is this comes from having played the sport of cricket where there are so many uncontrollables, and we become really good at that at the professional level, is accepting the things that you can't control and trying to control the things you can. But I think there's so much in tennis that people get carried away with, of all of these uncontrollables, and they just focus on that, and it cooks them. And I have loved getting into the sport to help people take sort of my mentality from cricket and be like, right, let's accept the things we can't change and just focus on the things that we can. Amazing. Well, mate, I'm keen to just stay in touch and talk more about it, because you're just going to be in for the ride, and we're sucking you in, mate. We're sucking you into the greatest sport I'm done now. You got me. I'll have a tennis. I'm retiring from cricket this year, so then I'll maybe have a tennis racket in my hand. You're going to have to get a racket and start to get better at playing the game yourself. I've got a tennis court out the back of my apartment, so like I'm literally got no excuse.
Mate, let's get it. I'm guessing lefty.
Gonna be lefty, has to be.
Yeah.
The thing I'm considering is whether I'd be a single or double backhand.
Double backhand would be easier to get you going, but
Yeah, fair. Just bun it back.
but one hand backhand's always cooler.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, but mate, thanks again. Appreciate it so much.
Loved it.
Yeah, and we'll do it again sometime.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate it.